Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Sorry.
I hope all the people from the 70s came out. Are all the people from the 70s here?
I was born in the
70s. These are war stories from the 70s. And Beverly's like, yeah.
All right, we're going to keep going here.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I said I was going to pick up where I left off, but I already forgot what that was. But simply introducing our event. Thank you again for coming. And it is really our honor to be here in conversation with John Redhouse, the author of this book, the first of several books that we hope to publish with Red Media Press. As I was saying, right, Red Media is currently an kind of a progressive leftist small publishing company called Common Notions, based out of Philadelphia and Brooklyn. But we hope to become our own press sometime soon in the coming years. And so you can find out more if you're interested about Red Media Press at our tables back here. They're back in the back. There are also refreshments. There's some snacks and some drinks back there if you would like those. You can also learn more about the Red Nation. Red Media was kind of born out of the on-the-ground organizing here in reservation border towns, but out on the land that the Red Nation has been doing over the past decade, that really very much inspired by, our Red Power revolutionaries like John and his contemporaries in the 1970s, the warriors, as Jennifer just said. And so this is, Red Media is a media project and a media organization that came out of really on the ground, boots on the ground kind of organizing. So you can learn more about both Red Media and the Red Nation on this tables on back. You can also purchase this book up at the register. And John will sign your book if you would like for him to here after the event. We also have a table back here since what Red Media tries to do, right, with all of the books that we select for publication and try to bring out into the world is, right, we're trying to provide a venue, especially for grassroots or organic intellectuals, really, to inspire movements. We're very interested in building power within the traditions of Native liberation. And so we also have a table back there of political ed, zines, and publications of various kinds. In fact, many of John's publications have existed in that format for the last 50 years. Perhaps one of his most famous publications, The Geopolitics of the Navajo Hopi Land Dispute, is back there, but we will be publishing it in a John Redhouse reader sometime here, hopefully next year, to be honest, in an official format, in the way that we see here with his memoir. And his memoir was also self-published in 2014. And that's where I first encountered it when I went into his papers and his collections at the Center for Southwest Research at the University of New Mexico here in Albuquerque. So please feel free to go back, peruse the political ed, and pick up whatever you would like. I was asked to make one more announcement about our sign here. We'll introduce ourselves here momentarily and then get into the conversation. My comrade Cloud is not on the sign, somebody who would be participating today, but I'll let you introduce yourself here in a moment, Cloud, and then we'll go through. And finally, I just wanted to remind folks that, Red Media is almost entirely funded by subscribers and members, people who I think really appreciate and are inspired by the work that we do. We have a podcast as well that's been up and running for almost 6 years now. It's quite successful in terms of podcasting, providing kind of content from a Native and a leftist perspective, which is actually quite rare if you are familiar with the podcasting world. And so please consider joining our Patreon. You can find our Patreon online. The money that you give us directly goes towards these kinds of projects, the things that we're doing here, giving people our remarkable warriors and our leaders like John a venue, right, for sharing their knowledge and their experience with a much larger audience. So please consider joining our Patreon. There's more information about it on the tables back there if you're interested. So enough of the housekeeping kind of stuff. I introduced myself, Melanie Yazzie. Again, part of Red Media, helped to co-found Red Media, helped to co-found the Red Nation. And really at Jennifer's urging, which has been my life a lot, in the best way possible, Jennifer introduced me to John over a decade ago, and then really pushed me to spend the last year and a half of my life really trying to bring this project into fruition, actually. I'm a trained academic. I'm a professor. I'm employed at universities, and I was able to use some of my university funding that you get sometimes when you're a professor to help fund this project. And so it's really near and dear to my heart. I don't know, just as a Dene intellectual, as someone who considers myself also a freedom fighter for our people, a protector of our people, the land and the water. and really look up to John as a comrade and a relative in struggle, and as someone who I have a great deal to learn from. So this project is also near and dear to my heart, and it's just really an honor and a pleasure to have been asked by John to write the introduction for the book. I wrote the introduction for the book, and to be here with you all today to talk about his work and to honor him. So I'll pass it to Cloud, and we'll all do introductions, and then we'll just get into the conversation. And then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A from our live audience here, but also if there's anyone online watching the live stream, we can also take questions from them. So Cloud.
All right, hello, yeah, hey everyone. Yeah, my name is Cloud. I am I've been organizing for a while now, probably about since Occupy. So I've been involved in various projects and movements throughout the years. And it's just an incredible honor to be here today and to be in conversation with John and with Jennifer as well. It's extremely humbling, and I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, but yeah, I've been organizing for a little bit, so yeah, I'm just glad to be here.
Awesome. Member of the Red Nation. John? Yeah, to introduce yourself.
Yeah. I'm John Redhouse, the author of the book here. I'm Navajo and Ute, Mountain Ute. My mother was half Ute, and her maternal clan is Stotchini, so my clan is Stotchini. This book has been crying out to be published for some time, and I'm grateful and just beyond words, beyond any kind of emotion that my works over the past 52 years, are finally beginning to see print, beyond just the self-published version and the versions that you'll find in my collection, John Redhouse papers at the University of New Mexico Center for Southwest Research. When I was a young man, when I wasn't even I was a 17-year-old senior. I just graduated from Farmington High School in 1969, and I was getting interested and involved in American Indian affairs. I just joined the National Indian Youth Council, and I was inspired by many of the great words and works, written works by Native activists such as Herb Blatchford, Clyde Boyer, Mel Tom, Shirley Hill, Hank Adams, and other legends who were involved primarily in the 1960s. And I was inspired by the words and by their actions, often direct actions, regional and tribal actions that were high impact in nature and resonated throughout the decades and resulted in beneficial change and policy change for our people and for our nations. And I said to myself, and it was in the third week in June 1969, that someday I would like to write a book about important things. And of course, I was very young, and I needed some reality checks. I didn't really know about important things at that time. But throughout the years and the decades, I learned in a direct way on the front lines, in the trenches, on the land with the people kind of way. And in 2013, 2014, much at the urging of Jennifer and the late great Dr. Larry Emerson, I embarked upon this 15-month endeavor to write a book, to take up the pen and write the book. And I dedicated it to the people who were there, my comrades, warriors, my heroes, and just great people of my generation who were part of these times, the 1970s, the turbulent 1970s. Often there is a gap in books on Native activism. There's a gap because it doesn't really discuss in depth, in any substantive depth, what happened in the four corners of the Southwest. And the Red Power movement was very alive and well, and still is in the Southwest, as it is across Turtle Island, throughout the indigenous world. I wanted to fill that gap, not through writing in a library or doing archival research and writing using secondary sources. I actually lived and worked during these times, and I was very much part of it in organizing and working in leadership positions in activist organizations. And I write about these in the chapters here. Every chapter could be a book unto itself. The body of work, not only by myself, is enormous. And it's not so much about my work as it is my working relationship with my comrades and organizers and leaders of that time. So I would like to emphasize that. It's a memoir, but it's also a dedication and written in the honor and respect for those who were there. So I would like to now pass it on to Jennifer, who in an email written in 2010 to write this memoir. By all means, write this memoir. So it's fitting that I turn this to Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer.
Diego Bakehinson, John. She Jennifer Denetdale and she Logan Schlon, she him Bashing, the Chini Dashe, two head leading Dashanella without a the nest son Schle. Combel Diesel, the Shanan Nishnat, the University of New Mexico, are a professor and chair of American Studies without a Shanan Nishnat. Though I see Tohach in that I see that Nasha, which is a community, a chapter that is about 20 miles north of Gallup, my favorite hated border town. And I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very pleased to see this book in publication. I really want to thank Bosky, Books on the Bosky, for having this space to have this talk with John. I met John through email. I don't even remember, it must have been before 2010, because I was in the archives I'm a historian by training. I was at the University of New Mexico's Southwest Research Archives, and I was reading through John's papers. And I read one letter to a guest column that he'd written for the Navajo Times. That guest column that he wrote changed the way I do my scholarship. In that guest column, he offered his thoughts on this was probably the guest column was written in the 1980s, because that was when the Navajo Nation settled its land claims, thereby extinguishing all claims to Aboriginal Denetdale lands. And John had done extensive research, as you'll see in this book. And he came to find out that the extinguishing of Aboriginal Navajo claims led to an agreement with Navajo leaders of on the dollar for land extinguished, 1846 land prices. And I was just like, I was stunned. And I think John later told me that the editor didn't publish any more of his guest columns after that. but that was so formative for me in terms of my scholarship and looking at things critically. And so I was like, I must meet this John Redhouse. So I did this. This was like new. This was like new to do to do Google searches. I don't know what it was called then. So I Googled John and I found him. I only emailed him, and he responded to me. And he had just left or had just moved to Pyramid Lake, and he had been in Albuquerque. And so from that came along a long-term relationship in which I consider John to be my mentor and my advisor. And I just really so much appreciate his scholarship. He is a prolific writer. He's an incredibly critical, thoughtful scholar that if you just go and look at his writings, it's just incredible. So with that.
All right. Yeah, thank you everyone for those wonderful introductions. I forgot to add, the book actually launched 2 days ago on July 1st, 2025. Jennifer just mentioned that John now lives in Pyramid Lake, where he has a lot of family, the Pyramid Lake Paiute Nation in Nevada. We were just there, we came in, our flight was delayed by 5 hours, so we got in around 10:30 last night from Reno, but we were able to do an official live stream from the Tribal Museum and Cultural Center there out in Pyramid Lake 2 days ago. So if you're interested in watching that, you can go to our YouTube channel and some of our platforms, because this conversation here will be related to that, but what I'm hoping is kind of the facilitator of these events, right? I said this is the second of 4 events we're doing, is that each of our stops, we're in Albuquerque today, we'll be in Farmington tomorrow, and we'll be at the Gallup Flea Market on Saturday, and we started in Pyramid Lake 2 days ago, that each conversation will be just different, right? To give us a really well-rounded understanding of why this is actually such an important book. And I think why it's an important moment in history also, I think for Native intellectual and political work. So yes, if you want it, or if you're interested in the Farmington event or the Gallup Flea Market event, please go. Also, we have the information here as well, QR codes that you can access to see about those events. But the Pyramid Lake struggle, the reason why I wanted to bring that up before I go into my first question for John, you know, his wife, Carol Wright, is a legend in and of herself. She has facilitated the self-publishing of all of John's work over the last several decades. She's a trained journalist, also a revolutionary, very historic figure, important figure in Red Power. And, you know, her children, right, her family is in Pyramid Lake, and this is why, you know, they are there now. But their struggle for water rights to protect Pyramid Lake is part of a very important part of this longer story, right? The war stories, as Jennifer says, the war stories that John documents here in other regions where our relatives have been engaged in the struggle to protect their people and their land and water, you know, pretty much since 1492. And so it was really an honor and very fitting that we started this book tour in Pyramid Lake, because John wrote much of this next to Pyramid Lake, actually, this memoir. It was very inspiring for him. So with that, John, I wanted to ask you a couple of related questions, and we'll start there. So the first is, why did you write this book? Like, why did you write this book? And related to that, how would you like new generations of activists or just our people to engage with this? What would you like for them to use your book for? The not just lessons, but taking action based on what you write here.
Well, I talked about that gap earlier, and there have been some works written by non-Indians about the Four Corners and the Southwest, and some aspects of the issues that I discussed in my book, and they touch on this, they touch on that. Some of the authors, I would say all of the authors, are non-Indian, and they don't know what it's like to be on the receiving end of racism, discrimination, and exploitation, and colonialism, and injustice, and genocide, and the kind of horrors, the kind of Holocaust that we've experienced since 1492, and that all of those things I mentioned, they're still ongoing, and in fact are worsening because they are continuing. And Indian people are still being killed and just adds to the total sum of the ongoing genocide. I'm not only talking about the United States or even North America, but throughout the Western Hemisphere, North, Central, and South America. And Indian people are being killed, as we speak at this on this day and at this very hour. And it's a real, it's real. Land is still being taken. People are still dying. Our territories are still being invaded. And so, those are elements of war. And so it's part of the longest war in history. And, it adds to, when I talk about the genocide of our people, the mass murder of our people, we were talking about 98% of our people being killed as a result of this white invasion, whether it's outright genocide or being subjected to colonial conditions, starvation, land loss, other kinds of atrocities. And 98% of our land and our people, disappeared. And that, when we talk about genocide and the Holocaust, it's very real. It's very real in our experience and in our memories and in our struggles. It adds context to that. And I remember, as I began my career, actually my life's work as an activist, I looked around and saw the state of Native America, of the indigenous world, and just blown away by the magnitude of all of these things, the genocide, the dispossession, and that it's still continuing, and that we are at a state of war. So what I described are elements of war: the invasion, land being taken, our people still being killed. And I said to myself, my people are at war, and so I too am at war. And so that became my lifetime commitment and dedication to the work, to my life's work. And in writing this book, I write about this very important period, this really high impact period that really hasn't received any kind of decent historical treatment, especially by a Native person who was there, who was on the front lines and in the trenches, and who's some of my comrades who were killed, murdered, assassinated because of the work here. So it's it comes very near and dear to my heart, to let generations and the readership know about these things, and to help contextualize how they shape and frame their life's work, their contribution to indigenous resistance and liberation struggles. They must know this history. That's why I say that this book is crying out to be published. And thanks to Red Nation, Red Media, Common Notions Press, this will finally reach a wider readership. And as part of my legacy, I'm in my mid-70s now. As part of my legacy, but it's to present and future generations in struggle. But it is also an offering. It's an offering. I did this when I early retired, and Social Security financed the research and writing of the book here. And I didn't receive a grant or a fellowship or anything like that. So it was written out of love and as flowing out of my life's work. I want to put that in some context as well.
Thank you so much for that, John. I think building on that, Jennifer, if I can direct a question to you, You're the first Dene person to ever earn a PhD in history, 1999, right? That's when you got that. So we're here with legends here. Again, more than one legend here on this panel on this Thursday morning. And, you know, Jennifer was my advisor. She directed my dissertation. And I remember when I was working on my dissertation, she really urged me to do Navajo studies, to look at the history of Navajo, what we now call Dene studies within the Dene Studies Conference Association, which is the major kind of academic association of Dene scholars or people who do scholarship on Dene people and issues in history. And so, you know, Jennifer is the person who taught me how to look at and to examine, to understand, and to see my place within the arc of the intellectual history of our people, which obviously predates colonialism. It predates publishing books and writing, right? It exists in oral histories. It exists in what we now understand as material culture, right? The way in which we produce knowledge as Dene people. And Jennifer influenced me to do that and trained me how to do that because she herself knows how to do that. She's a historian of our people and a very important figure within that history. And so I wanted to ask you, Jennifer, given the wealth of your knowledge and your position within that history, what is the significance of this book within the intellectual and political history of our people?
That's a hard question.
I didn't prepare her.
And it's a multi-layered question. I just, you know, as an historian, I was trained at the Northern Arizona University by a Mexicanist and a Latin Americanist, and an American environmental historian and an American intellectual historian. There wasn't an indigenous professor. And I made, with that crew, I made my way through and created my own sense about Dene history and indigenous histories. And so I'm really grateful for that foundation of, it was very theoretically foundational to my work. So because my graduate school was theoretical, the first time I went into the archives, I was in graduate school preparing for my dissertation. I went to Washington, D.C., and I sat around for a couple of days because nobody came to tell me what to do. I had no idea. And so I'm sitting there in my boarding house room, and I'm like, there's nobody to tell me what to do. So after 2 days, I found my way to the federal archives and the Federal Triangle, and that really began my search. So when you go into the archives and you're an indigenous person, you have a response, you have an emotion to what you're reading about the past. It gets you angry. It's so outrageous, the treatment of indigenous people, the rationalization, the legitimizing of the theft of an entire continent. It's just truly a horror story, you know? And so I've had to come to terms with that, if you ever come to terms with that. So you're also in a public education system that's meant to make you into a worker for the capitalistic system. It makes you compliant and taking your place in this world that is not meant for you. So on the one hand, you do the kind of work that John has done in terms of a critique of these structures of which we live in, which are not friendly, which are very hateful and violent to indigenous people. So you do that on the one hand. On the second hand, you are always cognizant of those spaces of liberation, of those spaces and those places where you're yourself, where you find your own people, your love, your acceptance, your generosity, and your compassion with your own people. And with my own people, with my indigenous people, with my Dene. I do those two things in my work as an indigenous and a Dene scholar. So John doesn't start in this book with, I was born on this day. I had a mother and I had a father and I had this many siblings. I've read memoirs for 2 years straight, you know. So the clarity of he's in his words just now, he said, this is an offering. Okay? This is an offering. He makes it sound and look like, and it is for him even today, that this is just the ordinary day of life of what you do on behalf of your people. This is how you respond to constant theft, to constant violence, And so the clarity of that vision hasn't shifted for John at all. And so it's a pleasure to read this book. I've had many conversations with John over the years, and we just sit and talk. And some of the things, and he mentions them in here. So some of the things he says in terms of when he's mapping out the connections and the collaborations between the federal government, energy corporations, and the leaders. It's like it's this incredible map that you can't really see how he sees it, because he's spending weeks in the government documents in the law library. Okay, you can only just imagine how much time he's spending mapping that, and then how he retains that information. I was listening to the conversation from Pyramid Lake, and I think Melanie and Carol are talking about a certain incident, and they say, well, I think it was 1982, or I think it was 1984. And then John was like, it's 1986 at 12 p.m., like he has that kind of memory. Okay. And so I just appreciate all the names that he's putting in here, all the people that I know that are now in their late 60s and their early 70s who were on the ground. I'm like, hey, I know that person. Hey, I know that person. John by no means has become a liberal, okay? The years has not done that to him. In this book, you see the clarity of his mind and the clarity of his purpose. So that's what I want to say.
Do you want to respond to that at all, John? No? Thank you, Jennifer, for contextualizing that for us. I'll hand it over to you, Cloud, to ask John our next question, and then we'll go from there. Sound good?
All right. Yeah, right. Like, what was most striking to me reading this book was, the political clarity of like your analysis, just the sharpness of it, and just the amazing memory. It's like, I can't imagine doing that myself, right? Like, I read a lot, and like I still like the retention and attention to detail that you have is just like amazing, and something to definitely look up to. And yeah, like I could just like sit around, listen to war stories all day. I would love to. But kind of in the second chapter, you do mention an interesting clash with the police. I was just wondering, where did you learn that judo throw? And can you teach me? But but seriously though, I was curious, like, what was it like to actually organize during the COINTELPRO era, and like how did state repression show itself in the movement, and especially here in the Southwest?
Well, we organized under the Coalition for Navajo Liberation, and there were different groups involved in that. Of course, we had the Navajo groups who came from the areas of the 3 Navajo men that were murdered, that were tortured and murdered and mutilated. And so, they were directly affected, and they formed the leadership. They formed the leadership of the outrage that was being expressed through organized protest. They were really the heart of the protest. In organizational terms, it was the coalition, and they did represent, various families and communities, clans, and that's kind of the way it emerged, and the leadership, the true leadership flowed out of that. It really is really remarkable. In terms of the coalition, as made up of different groups, it was the NAACP, the blacks in Farmington. They of course were outraged that their red brothers and sisters were being treated that way, not only in April of 1974, but before that, much before that. And many of the, our black brothers and sisters, I would say most of the families, escaped racism themselves. I had a number of black friends that I went to school with or played basketball with that fled Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana, that fled with their lives. They got on the bus and went as far as they could to escape the lynching and the racially motivated hate crimes coming from those areas. So they understood racism. They understood, violence, based on the color of their skin. And so, so the NAACP was an important part. The San Juan County Human Rights Committee, through Reverend Henry Byrd, he had done a lot of organizing against the Vietnam War, and also in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. The movement started. The momentum of that movement began with the killing of Emmett Till, and continued on up. So he was a very key figure in leadership and influence, and how the protests were conducted peacefully and with dignity, and with respect to to the hate crime victims. And he was also an Episcopal priest. He preached at the San Juan Mission, the Episcopal Mission, and the membership of that were all Navajo. He was a very beloved pastor there, and some of the hate crime victims, several of the hate crime victims, their families were members of his congregation. There were also white members of the human rights of the San Juan County Human Rights Committee that that said that listen to these people, don't react with with force or more hatred. They were urging peace, not only from the hate crimes rings actually that have operated up there for a long time, and then also from the police and from the city. They were wanting to repress the movement there. He was urging dialogue, because they're not talking about about revenge so much as they're talking about a prevention to these kinds of chronic conditions and problems that just keep reoccurring. Alcoholism was a big part, a big part of their arguments. Farmington did not have an alcohol rehabilitation center at that time. Yet their liquor sales are very lucrative. They collect a lot of sales tax from the sale of liquor, and none of that that money just goes into the general fund. It could go for something to help meet the needs of the people. And also the Indian Center, the Farmington Indian Center, it was it was inadequate to say the least. It did not provide any programs or services to help the people who came there. And so and there were many other concerns that were being expressed. Positive, constructive change is what we want to come out of it in a long-term sort of way, and that would provide a better basis for race relations that aren't based on hate and violence. And so, they were of that mind. Everybody was of that mind. And so 10 demands were written up by the members of the coalition. Also, the Church Women United, they were also there. I could name names. But there were many who saw our side of what we were trying to raise through peaceful legal protests. And the first march, well, we had 5 peaceful legal marches, and the police tried to, in the streets of downtown Farmington, and the police tried to provoke us. The local rednecks and teenagers tried to provoke us, but we had strong leadership. We had collective leadership, and we had our own security, and we handled the situation. We did not fall into their hands because they wanted to provoke us to do something so they could have an excuse to come in and just brutalize us, like what they really want to do. They really wanted to do that. The police, the city officials, the businessmen, and the hatred, the racial hatred, they're really, really ugly, particularly in 1974. 1973, 1974, that's when, in terms of hate crimes committed, I would honestly have to say that Farmington was the hate crime capital of the West at that time. And through our protests, through our demonstrations, through our marches, and through different kinds of effective media events, we put Farmington, New Mexico, USA on the map there. Now everybody knows about it because, those racist conditions, are still continuing. I mean, I don't know if you can really say it's improving because it is still continuing. Our people are still being killed up there because of who they are, these racially motivated hate crimes. They may not be on the same order of the Chokecherry Canyon Massacre, but they still are taking away our family and our relatives and our people. And that adds, when I talk about the Indian wars, that adds to the genocidal sum, because they are being killed because they are Indian. They are being killed because of who they are. And so, so that, we can, I'll talk more about that when I get up in Farmington. But the repression, the repression was incredible. You had the city police, you had San Juan County, and you had the state police, and then you had the National Guard, which was ready to move in. If the provocation were to work out as the enemy intended, they were ready to move in and they were ready to kill us. When I was arrested, they said that we're going to kill all of you effing Indians. This came from a law enforcement official, and they hated us. They said, I don't care who you call in, we're going to kill all of you effing Indians. You Indians asked for it now. When we tried to take some direct action, not direct action, it was peaceful legal action in blocking the streets of a very racist unit in the San Juan County Sheriff's Posse Parade. That's in chapter 2, the second half of chapter 2. So instead of me trying to recount that, buy the book and read it, and be attentive as you read. The police repression was, throughout that long hot summer, we call it. Actually, it was the late spring and the summer of 1974. But yes, I do talk about other instances of police repression against Native people, who are protesting not only in Gallup, not only in Farmington, but also Gallup and Grants and Flagstaff and other hostile border towns.
So
I might mention the FBI was also very much involved, not to be surprised.
So, John, I wanted to maybe continue on this thread of the on the ground, right? What was actually happening in that moment, and take us back a little bit in time to when you were 17 years old and you became politicized for the first time, how you entered into the movement. I've heard this story now a few times because I've conducted some oral histories with John over the last year and a half, which will be published in the next book. And John talked about this, a bit during the launch event at Pyramid Lake 2 days ago, but could you tell us again, or tell it however you want, the story of how you became politicized, how you entered the movement as a teenager, how you became an activist?
Well, growing up in Farmington, I had a lot of anger and hatred in me because I was a Navajo and had dark skin, and anybody who was Indian, had dark skin during the 1950s and 1960s would relate to the negative experiences of living in a what we call a white racist border town. We were the minority. We were mistreated at a very young age, all the way through high school, and then and beyond. In the workplace, and if you live there, and it's just the reality of living with living in that kind of environment and atmosphere. So it had a radicalizing effect on me. And it did that because I politicized my anger and my hatred by joining the then emerging Red Power movement. Actually, it was the modern Red Power movement. And the lead organization, the main organization at that time, was the National Indian Youth Council. And it was originally founded in 1961 in Gallup, New Mexico. And then it moved to Schurz, Nevada. And then it moved to the University of California at Berkeley. And then in 1969, it moved to Albuquerque. And that's when it became, I think it blossomed. It found its main headquarters, like the American Indian movement, is headquartered out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and United Native Americans at that time was in the Bay Area. You had these Red Power movements, that were very, was emerging and expanding, and made up much of the Red Power movement. But in Albuquerque, I'd read in the Gallup Independent in May of 1969 that they had now set up their national headquarters in Albuquerque. And I'd read these famous names, then famous names of Gerald Wilkinson, Sam English, and Catherine Redcorn, and Bill Pinson, and others that came from different tribes that were part of this movement. And I thought, that's not too far away. I would like to join. And they had what was called the NIYC was holding its second Institute in American Indian Studies. They had held one in 1969 at Haskell Junior College, and they had probably about 50 students from all across the nation, Native students across the nation, and Canada that attended that. And it was part of also the development of American Indian Studies. They got college credit, and it was through anthropology, but things like colonialism and treaties, and what the Red Power movement was doing in direct action, like the fish ends in 1964. The first Alcatraz takeover in 1964, things like that. It was framed under anthropology, 301, 302 is the upper level one, but they managed to, finesse it so that, we'd get the content of what they wanted to impart. It was kind of a training ground for Red Power activists is really what it was. And, it's what you get out of it. And in 1969, there were 3 institutes, 50 each, about 50 each, at the University of Colorado at Boulder. That's the one I went to, at UCLA and Stout State University in Wisconsin. So there are about 150 students that Native students from, again, across the nation and Canada, that receive those instructions, that receive those course offerings, and it's what you got out of it. I personally was, for me, the Boulder Institute, I learned about things like colonialism from Dr. Robert Thomas, a Cherokee scholar and great man. He was part of the Pan-Indian movement that was going on at that time. He did a lot of good work in Canada and also in Mexico in his long career. But back in 1967, 1966, 67, he wrote several works on colonialism as it related to Native Americans. And this was, it was published. We received, we got, we got that as part of his, his lectures, and we got some of other notes that he had written. And this was written for, for Indian students. It wasn't written for anthropologists and he later went on to, to do a really excellent job in founding a flagship Native American Studies with Vine Deloria Jr. at the University of Arizona in 1980s. But to have conversations with them after the lecture and to learn about these things for a 17-year-old kid. I just graduated from high school, and then less than a month later, I'm learning about this about all this material. Listening to meeting and listening to Vine Deloria Jr., who also lectured at the Institute. He was a graduating law school student at UC Law School there, and we had a barbecue at his place one time, and I formed a lifetime relationship, a friendship with Vine Deloria Jr. I saw him a few years before he passed away here at the Albuquerque Convention Center, and we still talk about old times. But he had just written several chapters of his then upcoming book, a bestseller, "Custer Died for Your Sins: An American Indian Manifesto," and that too was an expression of the Red Power movement. And I was influenced by the New Indians, written by Stan Steiner in the summer of 1968. And it wasn't Stan's writing so much as it was the writings or the statements that he that he had as part of his books of great people. Clyde Warrior, of Herb Blatchford, and Nell Tom, and just writing about very important, very impactful things, and that I was deeply influenced, deeply moved by just the importance and the substance and the emotion, the feeling, the Native feeling, the soul of the writings, because they knew. That's what that's why I said in June of 1969 I would like to write a book about important things. By the time I wrote this in 2013, 2014, I knew about those important things. As a 17-year-old, of course, I didn't, but I wanted to have the same kind of impact that was made on me when I read about important things back in 1968 and 69. I talk about the legacy and the offering and, passing on to present and future warriors, scholars. And so, again, that's why I say that this is part of the dream coming true here. But, I joined the National Indian Youth Council during, well, actually it was a month before I went to the Institute. And then I met all of my NOIC brothers and sisters in Boulder. And then later when we had our annual meeting, when NOIC had an annual meeting, they had their office at 3102 Central, Southeast in the Nob Hill district. It was just a one, it was just a storefront office, and there were only 3 people that were staffing it at that time, but it was the national headquarters. And Gerald Wilkinson was executive director. Sam English was the associate director. Catherine Redcorn was the secretary there. But all kinds of Indian youth had gone, had gone over there and had a very good working relationship with the Kiva Club, the UNM Kiva Club at that time, which was pressing for the establishment of a Native American Studies Center at the University of New Mexico. And it was NOIC, principally NOIC youth that were pushing that, Conroy Chino in particular. And, he's now an elder like me, and we had our annual meeting at the University of Albuquerque. It's now St. Pius now. Just 150 of my NOIC brothers and sisters. We had 3 days of meetings. We had a demonstration downtown at the BIA in support of the Indian employees who were being discriminated against. We had kind of a confrontation, a sit-in, and we had negotiations. And I said to myself, this is where I want to be. These are the people I want to work with. We are about those important things. I feel at home here. It's just that feeling. I just turned 18. I started 17, and then on July 25th, I turned 18, and by that time the institute was finishing up last week, and then it's a dream come true, but also my life's work. Actualizing the work that NOIC was about. And other activist organizations. And it was, as they called it, it was working and fighting for a greater Indian America, for a greater Indigenous America, for a greater Native America. I can say that I've had a very fulfilling and rewarding life and work, life work there. And this is a part of it that 9 years that I was out there for I put in 40 years in the Indian and the Native rights movement, and then I retired early in order to write this and 4 other books at Pyramid Lake, and I was able to do that in 7.5 years. And I knew that that was mostly in my 60s when I did that. And I knew that I was going to get health problems once I got in my 70s. And, now that I'm in my mid 70s, yes, I do have health problems, and, I can't be as prolific and effective as I used to be. But it's been a very good life, and retirement, working retirement. And I'm very glad, very honored to be here to speak to you good people.
Thank you for sharing that story with us, John. Jennifer, do you have any questions or comments on anything that's been shared so far?
John's talking, I'm thinking about a bunch of stuff, but I'm not remembering right now. I'm getting to that elder stage, but well, maybe I am at that elder stage. But I just, I just feel like when John says this is a life's work, this is a life well lived. I can really appreciate that he spent his life for the greater good of Indigenous people, of Indigenous America. And I think it's something that our people need to hear again and again and again. There's just not enough of those kinds of stories that circulate publicly. And so it's really wonderful to read this book with the clarity with which he's written it.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to pass it back to Cloud if you have another question for John or comment or both.
Yeah, I think as a younger organizer, I think it's really important that we do listen to our elders, our movement elders, from those who have, done this work before. And I guess in that vein, do you have any, advice, or what sorts of skills do you think newer organizers, what we should develop, or things we should prioritize in the movement today?
Well, of course, we're in the movement because we love our people. We're concerned about our people, and it's always been that way since the Native resistance began in 1492, and that's the reason why we are here today, is because because there were other people, other Native people who stood up for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So there was resistance and liberation struggles that go back to the to that 500 plus years, and that must be honored, and it will continue until we reach victory. And because there's a lot at stake here, and we're playing for keeps. The situation is absolute. Ultimately, it's a question. It becomes a question. The issue is survival or genocide. So you have to be of that mind, I think. Now back in the 1970s here, there were no cell phones, there were no computers, and we did things our way. A lot of times we just thought it up and did it, and we had our own way, and I think that that this generation here and future generations, I don't think, but they will do it their own way. They aren't kids. They're not young. They're young people, young adults, very serious, very sophisticated, very intellectual, very articulate, and they have their own way of doing this work, and I respect that. I'm not going to say, well, back in my day, we, like that, or preach or lecture. You should do it. You should conduct yourself this way or that way. I will not do that. I respect our young people. Mm-hmm. So, I don't want to say, in terms of imparting advice that I don't want to caution against, don't do it this way because, and using my past experience, as the only frame of reference, for making that judgment where I will not do that. I respect you, and you are the hope of our people and of our nations. And I just say, just right on, red power, red nation.
Thank you for that, John. I have one more question. We're about a little over an hour into this, and then maybe we can open it up for some Q&A from our audience here in person and then our audience who are joining for the live stream. This question is formulating in my mind. I hope I can make it clear enough for you to answer it well. But I remember in our conversation at Pyramid Lake 2 days ago, you know, there were a lot of comments from both you and Carol about the nature of being a native writer. Those are my words. That's not what you said. And I remember, John, you were talking, I had asked you the same question about how you became an activist or how you became politicized at the age of 17. And you were talking about the NIYC leaders, Herb Blatchford, you know, Clyde Warrior, and how they were these remarkable intellectuals, Vine Deloria, remarkable orators, right? Leaders. And you said that they exhibited a native way of thinking. And you said that it was pure. The way that they spoke, the way that they thought and they conveyed their ideas, both spoken and in writing, and that was something that you looked up to, right? That was something that was a style of communicating that you wanted to emulate. And I remember Carol, you know, John's wife, Carol's a journalist, as well as she's a journalist, but she also did a lot of. You have to write for the movement, right? When you're waging campaigns and struggles, writing is a very essential component of movement work. It's not just protesting, even though that is also central. There's a relationship between the research and the intellectual production and the knowledge production, and then how you are engaged in praxis or doing things on the ground. I think sometimes we don't see writing as important, as perhaps as important within movements. And this is something that we've emphasized always as the Red Nation in our 10 years of existence. And so Carol said she had to become a writer. She's like, I didn't know how to write. But here's Pyramid Lake, you know, trying to save the lake, literally saving the lake from going bone dry, the way that its sister lake, Winnemucca Lake, had gone bone dry because of settler development, literally sucking the life out of those lakes, right, for farming, for white ranching, probably for urban development in the Reno-Sparks area, which is, you know, the border town closest to Pyramid Lake. You know, and she talks about how that writing and working with white journalists, right, and white academics who wanted to reformulate her writing in a particular way so it sounded correct or proper. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do that. She says, what we need to do here is Indian talk. She used this phrase, Indian talk, and she called it Indian English. And she's like, I'm going to write in Indian talk and I'm going to write in Indian English. She said, because this is not for this larger white readership. She's like, this is for our people, the way we talk. And she trained a lot of people, a lot of just everyday Native people who never saw themselves as writers. She told this story. And she says, if you can say it, then you can write it. And she's like, and if you don't feel comfortable writing, they were like, I'm not a writer. Like a lot of our people are like, I'm not a writer. You know, we can't write. She would just ask them to tell her things. And then she would actually dictate it. And then she would write it. And so she called that style Indian talk. And so, John, you're talking about this native way of thinking, right, that was pure. And then Carol was talking about Indian talk. And you said earlier today that this book, Border Town Clashes, flows from your heart. And something Carol said 2 days ago, she said, if you want to be an Indian writer, you go with the heart. She's like, that's what matters the most, right? You write as it's an offering for your people. And so all of that, right, kind of all of that, how do you see yourself kind of fitting into that kind of definition or that approach to what it means to be a Native writer? And how does this book, you know, how is this book an example of Indian talk, right? How is this book an example of that, that Native way of thinking that inspired you all those years ago, at the age of 17, to think in your mind that one day I'm going to write a book, you know, fashioned in the footsteps of these incredible intellectuals and writers who are presented to me here at these Clyde Warrior Institutes?
Well, this is about 1972 to 1981, and that was when I was my most active in my activist advocacy work. After a while, you become less effective. You don't just stay in there, and you know, when you make the deliberate decision to move on, as I did, you make way for others. But before that, you often recruit and train and work with those who will follow. After I left NIYC in 1978 and we founded the American Indian Environmental Council, I did much of that in terms of working and training and mentoring and working with people that would carry on, for the next 9 years or for the next 40 years or whatever. It was a deliberate decision to do that. And it took about 2 years to get that to, where I felt good to step away. And, I also had to, felt I had to go back, I knew I had to go back to school. I dropped out to join the Red Revolution and, in the 70s after, when I joined NIYC and worked there full time. I still had to complete my undergraduate degree, and then I was looking at possibly getting my graduate degree and maybe teaching and writing. That was a possibility, or go to law school, go to the UNM Law School and to advocate as an attorney, or to join an Indian an Indian interest law firm like the Native American Rights Fund or the Indian Law Resource Center. They were doing exciting work in the area of international law, rather than just practicing federal Indian law and going that route. So that was what I did in 1981. I guess the summer the summer of 1981 is when I went back to school. I kind of wrapped up my activists, the organizing leadership work in the fall of 1981, and then I had become more humanized. I had a son. I had my parents and had my brother, sister, and getting back, I'd put work before them too many times. That wasn't right. And so I tried to make up for that and be a better father, a better parent, a better son, a better brother and uncle, and so on like that. To do that, and so throughout the 80s, I did writing and consulting, and I'd get small grants and contracts to do that. I finally did finish my undergraduate degree, but I was heavily into writing at that time. I just started my Roots of Navajo Relocation series, the second of which was the geopolitics of the Navajo Hopi Land Institute. And I just kept on going. And my consulting, I had people coming in from Black Mesa and Big Mountain and from the Aneth oil fields coming to see me and wanted me to help them because I had helped them when I was with these organizations before. They thought, well, he can still help us. And of course I couldn't. I didn't have the kind of staff or money like I did back then. But still, they give me $20 or a belt buckle or something like that, and we'd work out something, and I would help them in resisting relocation, in empowering their community, and it was community concerns, community issues, and they were resisting. They were fighters. I find it better that that they're fighters. Because I'm not a social worker, I'm not a lawyer. But if it'll help the resistance struggles, they are on the front lines. We talk about the front lines, but they are actually there. And they come hundreds of miles to come to see me. Yeah, of course I'm going to help them. And so I raised a little money, and we worked out something. So that became the basis of my consulting. And since then, from I worked with Tonawatsi Land Institute for several years, and they were doing important work. And then after that, then I began my consulting practice. That's what I call it. So it's been called different things: Redhouse Right Productions, Redhouse and Associates, the Navajo International Advocacy Project, the Navajo Sovereignty Project, and like that. And and I've long-term clients like the Denetdale Citizens Against Ruining Our Environment, Southwest Indian Indigenous Uranium Forum, and established groups like that. But most often, it's been the folks from the land.
Yeah.
Although I was able to land a good contract with the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe and writing the history of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Wars from 1844 to 1890, and helped them in decision making regarding the future protection and defense of their water resources, their tribal reservation water resources. And and a couple other fairly good paying consulting jobs that that help subsidize my work with the people that would come and give me $20 or offer to buy me a meal, something like that. They weren't fundraisers. So I was able to survive that way. My consulting practice, as I called it, later got to be encompass five states, client groups in 5 states, all native. I could have consulted with white groups and become their Indian, but I wasn't going to do that. I was going to help my own people. They always come first, and they're primary, and it's always been that way. So I had native client groups in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and then also in Washington, D.C., there was a non-Indian movie or film production company that's just doing a film on Larry Cassous, and so I'm working with them. So and there's a great deal of writing involved in consultancy, but it always involved research, writing, consulting, and some speaking, limited speaking, selected speaking. I don't want to do a whole lot of traveling because I wanted to be a good a good relative, a good parent, a good father, like that. And another concern I had about traveling, speaking and traveling, was because my work was so concentrated and so deadline oriented, and I need to have research products out, that when you go away for, I don't know, say 3 or 4 days, you come back and you're 3 or 4 days behind. And it catches up with you after a while on a cumulative basis, and you always want to meet your deadline, and because your clients are relying on you. So that was another reason for doing selective speaking, occasional speaking, and I always spoke for the UNM Kiva Club whenever they asked me to speak at the Larry Cassous Memorial Series. I was always there. And that series went from 1974 to 2016, I believe. So of course, was there. That Jennifer organized the 50th Larry Cassous Memorial event, and she asked me, and I said, "Ain't no doubt about it, I will be there." And Melanie and I had a good public conversation on that, and sure, Kiva Club, they'll always be there.
Yep. Thank you, John. Jennifer, do you have anything to add to that about native writing?
Yeah.
Yeah, here. Go.
I think in this book, what you find is that John did everything. John does everything. He is not only just an intellect, he is also an activist, a person. He actually, I think, doesn't use the word activist. That's the word we've assigned to people who are warriors who do the work all the time. That's kind of like a later kind of word. But John literally did everything in the 70s. And that's like, how do you even have time to be leading the protest in Farmington? And then be writing stuff and then be consulting. And so I don't know what to say about how John organized his life, because I can't organize my life that way. But I think one of the critical things that John points out, that's been his life and it's been this book, is how critical it is for us to do our own work, and that we have the kind of spirit and the kind of mind that John reflects in his work, and that I came to rely on. I'm working on I have a co-curated a Milton Stowe photography exhibition at the Maxwell Museum, and we're set to, that is based on the Maxwell Museum's collection of Milton Stowe photographs. We're set to officially open a Milton Stowe photography exhibition at the Navajo and Indian Museum on August 8th. And so we're like finishing up the last part of that. But just the amount of work that goes into writing a panel of like 300 words, like I'm spending three weeks, and I'm like, was it 1937 or was it 1938? What does hand-picked counsel mean? And I'm just like reading and reading. And I'm like, okay, now I know what hand-picked counsel means. And no, it was 1937. It wasn't 1938. Like weeks of that kind of careful work. A lot of writing by mainstream scholars of Navajos, for an example, will make it sound like things are benign. Like when they talk about the 1950 Navajo Rehabilitation Act, which poured millions of dollars into Navajo and Hopi, they make it sound like it was really a wonderful, excellent thing. It actually was about the opening of development. It was the after the 1920s into the 40s into the 50s, it was actually the sustained expansion to pave roads so that they could get to the coal that Peabody Coal got to but you wouldn't know that if you just read regular writers who don't know any better. You have to read stuff like John's, you have to talk to John, and I'm like, oh, that's not benign, that's not apolitical. And so you learn all of these things. And I remember one conversation, over the years, we've had conversations. And I remember John telling me, I don't know if I'm going to be wrong about this, but one time we were talking, and when I asked him, how did you come into this work? How did you become, we call it politicized, but to a consciousness? And he said he lived in Farmington. And one day he saw a Navajo man sitting on the curb. He sat down and had lunch with him, and he found out that he had been dislocated from the area of the JUA area, And so at UNM in American Studies, when Melanie was a graduate student, we developed a field called border town studies, okay? Because there's connections and there's reasons, historical reasons for why Indigenous people are seen as alien, seen as strangers onto Indigenous lands like Albuquerque and Gallup and Farmington. Those are our traditional lands, and yet we're presented as aliens and freaks that don't belong in these spaces. Those settlers don't belong in those spaces, and you're never told that until you start reading this stuff that's so critical, like John's work. You're just like, well, yeah, of course. So when I started reading Indigenous authors and John's work, I came to understand better my experiences, my observations, a way that that you could critically read archives, And so that's been a gift to me, to be able to do that and to pass on that kind of scholarship. So we do need our young people writing our own work, doing our own work, our own projects. We need to do that. And if there's not, it's not like there's ever like a sense of progress, the empire, there will be no progress in the empire. Okay. What we do have with the words of Melanie and of John is that there is an inspiration for struggle. There is a sense of continuity. There is a sense that there's been 500 years plus of Indigenous struggle that comes from the South to what this area is called, which is the US, up into the north. There's always been Indigenous struggle. We need to know those struggles. We need to name those warriors. We need to name those people so that we take our place in the struggle. That's the point, okay? And so you do it the way you do it through the community base. You do it through your intellectual work. So there's every day you have something to do. That's your self-care. I don't have time. Once I'll take a massage, but you get so caught up in yourself and you don't see the larger picture. And John has always seen the larger picture. And so for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Cloud, do you have any closing words, comments?
Yeah. So I guess a little bit more about me is I did grow up I was born here in Albuquerque, but I grew up in a smaller Texas town. And it was very difficult because I often had to justify my own existence. Like in social studies classes, I would have to basically prove my existence to the teacher, to my class every day. Because what was taught was that Indigenous people no longer exist, and so I was like a weird outlier. And what I really appreciate immensely about this book, about Red Media, the work that Red Nation does, is the valorization of my existence, right? And it's important that we tell our stories. And I'm just like incredibly grateful to be with people who understand that and who help to promote and to share our stories, because they're often pushed to the side and swept under the rug, and it really does help to give me myself like guidance and direction. I liked what I had it written here somewhere, but just like kind of finding a home in like a political home. And I feel like that's what I found in Red Nation and with everyone here. So just thank you so much. Okay.
John, any closing words?
Well, about my writing style, I don't research and writing style. Like for this book and the 4 others, I didn't really do any internet research for that. And I didn't really do it on computer. I knew that I was going to write this book in 1981, when things, I made that transition. I said, someday, And then when someday came on March 15th, 2012, it was time to start the process to finish these works. At that time, I was looking at writing 4 books, 2 of which were rewrites. I'd written a couple of booklets as part of my Roots of Navajo Relocation series, parts 5 and 6. I wasn't satisfied with it, and I don't want to say I burned out. It's just that there were other things happening in my life at that time, but I was still committed to finishing it someday. And so I decided to retire early. I was 60. I was 60. I put 40 years in the movement. 60 years old, and I said, well, 15 months by the time, before I get my Social Security. 18 months actually. And I said, but I'm gonna go for it. So I decided, so I retired early, and 15 months early, and then Carol and I moved back up to Nevada. Carol had been down here for some 40 years, and it was time for her to go home. Nothing was really keeping me here in Albuquerque. I had a very good, Albuquerque was a very good base for me for my activism work for 40 years, from 1973 to 2012. And I felt that it was a good 40-year run, but I'm gonna work on my own agenda now, an agenda that that was going to be pretty prolific, pretty challenging. But I'm determined to do this because I've been waiting for a long time for the opportunity to do that. I already had the book outlined, this particular book outlined. I got that done when I received a fellowship. Actually, it was a 6-month sabbatical for activists of color, long-term activists of color. I got that in 1999, along with 10 others that year. There were 200 in that program. There were 200 over a 15-year period or so that they got those fellowships or sabbaticals, for people to just reflect and renew their commitment to carry on. But you need time to to plan and get your teeth fixed and things that you kind of neglect when you're in the thick of things. It gave you a lot of freedom to to kind of create your own space and time to get those things done. And so one of the things was outlined in this book, and the other thing was pulling together my collection for my papers, for my papers to be donated to the University of New Mexico. Pulled all my papers together, the important ones anyway, so I was preparing to do that, and got that done in 2006, 2007. I had gotten most of that done in during my sabbatical in 1999. So in March of 2012, then I made the deliberate, well thought out decision to go do that for the next seven and a half years. Actually, I was looking at 7 years getting 4 books done. And so on July 1st, 2012 is when I took up my pen, literally, and started sketching out the first 2 books, the rewrites, and then I updated my collection. And then in the beginning, the first part of October 2013 is when I began working on this. And I took up my pen and got my legal pad out, my yellow legal pad out, and started sketching that out. So I wrote pretty much according to my outline there. And after each chapter or so, I'd go through my notes and get on my word processor and write it out that way. But this was mostly done, in longhand. It was based on the extensive notes and journal that I have for this, for the period 1972 to 1981, because I'm going to do in my mind, this story had to be told. So it was a relatively easy process for me. So I got it done in 15 months. What I would do is I sit out on my porch. There's a mountain. We're at Pyramid Lake. We're at about 4,000 feet. And this mountain goes up to about 8,400 feet. And the way the mountains are in Nevada, in northern Nevada, is that there's no real foothills. It just starts going up like that. They have all these little hills. You don't know if they're hills or they're mountains. There's mountains all around there. That's what they call mountains. But this one just got, it's got no forests on there or anything. But they have there's evidence of folks living there, indigenous folks living there. They go all the way back to 13,000 years, and and the lake too. There are caves on the north side. There's evidence of that as well. It's a very ancient and sacred area. Also, the Navajos, Navajos from Whitecone, Miller Nez, the president of the Navajo Medicine Association at the time, and Joe Dennison Sr. from the Naize area. He was the head of the Navajo Denetdale Medicine Association. I think they later called themselves. They would make pilgrimages to Pyramid Lake. There's this rock there that they call the Pyramid Lake Paiute called Stone Mother. But the Navajos call that White Shell Woman. In their travels, in their migrations, in their Athabascans all over, to the west, of course, to the north and the south where we are, and even to the east, in pre-Columbian times that made that trek to Stone Mother, give their offerings and like that. And there's a nice narrative written about that in the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribal Museum, giving the Navajo version of White Shell Woman living on the side of the Great Waters to the west of that. And the Navajos go there a lot. I first learned about it in 2010, and then some of my activist comrades have also gone up there as well. When they heard that Miller, so this group of Navajo medicine men took a bus, rented a bus, and went up to make offerings at White Shell Woman. It was in 2010. That's when I first learned of it, and then later I learned that Navajos that go up there. A lot, not just medicine men, but those who believe in Navajo religion, Navajo culture, Navajo prehistory that go up there, and they stop by the museum. Often they stop by the museum and want to know where the directions are, but it's like it's like they're drawn, there. It's a real rocky road to get there. It's not easy to get to. It takes about an hour to get there, and you need a four-wheel really to go there. I've taken a good friend of mine over there. That was the first time I went there, and but they know the story, just like they know the story of Old Denetdale, even though they've never been there. In their soul, in their collective soul, their tribal spirit, they know where Denetdale is. Old Denetdale is, and it's like they're drawn. It's like a, White Shell Woman, tribal goddess. It's like, it's like a connection. I don't know. It's kind of like I don't quite know how to say that in Western terms, but there's this bond. There's this connection. It's intangible, but it is powerful. It is eternal. And so, but anyway, getting back to the writing process, so I would sit out there and look at the mountain 5 miles away. You believe that? 5 miles away, it's when it starts going up 4,400 feet. I mean, it's like going to the base of the Sandias, at the 6,000 foot level, and then it's, it just goes on up like that. It's really remarkable. And and I write there. I wrote there, sketch things out there. Or I'd go to the lake. The lake is a sacred lake. It's 30 miles long, 10 miles wide at its widest, in width there. And you see the waves and the whitecaps and the fish going, jumping, and they see the pelicans come down. So it's an ancient prehistoric lake. The fish there, the kiwi and the loud trout, it goes back to prehistoric times. And you just get a sense of that this is ancient and sacred. And so it drew my inspiration too. Like, they got 10 beaches up there on the west side, on the west side of the lake that you can go to. So you go to, it's a good place to just go out there and, sketch out your renderings there. You don't break a computer or anything like that. You do that. So, it's just that process that I've always had. Some, other form, I've written emails and memorandums, stuff like that. I do that on computer. It's real easy. But I didn't want this to be an easy process. I want it to be done the old-fashioned way, like the way, that I wrote in 1969. My letters to the editor back then. I want it to be that way. And, to do it in the context of 1972 to 1989. This is where I don't say, this is where I say, like, Navajo instead of if that's the way it was, then that's why I say Indian instead of indigenous or native. Chippewa, Sioux, that's the way we talked back then. And Papago's call himself, written like that kind of, but it's in the 1970s. I know it's incorrect these days and, and everything, but, I wanted to make this like it was, it was there as I remembered it, as I experienced it, as I remembered it. That's kind of the writing process. Now, the not doing internet research kind of thing, again, I think that's pretty easy. It's also pretty incomplete too, because there's a lot of gaps there. I knew I was going to write this book, and so since 1981, I'd be gathering documents, periodicals, newspaper clippings, the yellowing newspaper clippings, and extensive notes and things like that, and that formed the basis for the 5 books that I wrote. I took 100 file boxes with me. We went up in 2 U-Haul vans there, and mine were pretty heavy. My wife Carol really complained about it. You need all that, I need all that. If I went the internet and research route, it wouldn't have been the same. So there was a certain methodology, as antiquated and archaic as it was. I was going to do it my way in the research and writing process, and I was going to draw on the nature of that mountain and that lake and the river, which is 5 miles away, which is 1 mile away. The lake is 5 miles away, and with the guiding spirit of Stone Mother and the White Shell Woman, to produce this here, and and my 4 other works. So otherwise, I got to whip this thing out in 6 months. No sweat. No sweat.
Thank you.
We should just clap. That's it. It's a mic drop. Oh, you got me really emotional there at the end, John, telling that story about your writing process. But we've come to the conclusion of our event today. I'd like to open it up for any questions or comments from our audience here in person. Or Justine, are there any questions or comments online? Nope. Okay. So we have time here. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about resource wars then and now?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a repeating pattern.
Okay.
The battles that were fought in Burnham, on the Navajo reservation, had to do with coal, and then around 2003, there was, and after that was defeated largely by the power of the people, the power and will of the people who lived on the land there. It wasn't the lawsuits were lost. It was the resistance there that threatened the capital investment that was going to go into those monster coal gasification and strip mines there. And that the resistance was unbeatable. The people inside were stronger than the forces that were threatening them. There's no way they were unconquerable. There's no way they would have put those in without resistance, even though you could call it terrorism or whatever, monkey wrenching. Those plants were going to go in, and the corporate minds, did the feasibility studies, and no, we're not going to put it in that unstable region. That would threaten our capital investment. So people were, again, the stakes were high. You put people in a corner, they're going to strike back. You threaten a rattlesnake that's not doing anything, it's going to strike back with what was it? Strike back with decisive, strike back decisively. I think that's what I said one time when I talked to the young birds. Strike back with the decisiveness of a rattlesnake. They're threatening. So anyway, around 2013, the nightmare came back. The coal was there. It was leased. It was mineable. Technologically, it was mineable. They just wanted to put in the power plant. They had Plan B power plants too. The Plan A didn't work. They had their infrastructure all ready to go. They think they had the water. I don't think they had the water rights to do that. So again, the matriarchs up there, said "Dota Denetdale." Dota means no desert rock power plant here. And there are three aspects to the Desert Rock Energy Project. There was the mine, there was the power plant, and there were the transmission lines. Not to mention the man camp and the construction camp, and the man camp, and so forth, and a community, largely white community, that would live there for the length of the project period, which would be about 35 years there. But there again, you had another generation of coal warriors, water warriors out there, and by 2010, by golly, they defeated it. Dota Denetdale, those ladies there, Sarah White and Elaine, Eleanor Brown, and Pauline Gilmore, Molly Hogue, they Lucy Willie. They were, they were the driving force. It was those women that led that resistance up there on the ground with the people resistance. They mobilized their community. And the lawsuits are more successful this time, but they work very effectively with the environmental organizations, and they became the lead plaintiffs and lead appellants in the various actions that that eventually resulted in the Desert Rock Project sponsors pulling out there. So you had these reoccurrences there, and with Black Mesa, you had a scenario there in the late '60s and early '70s that came about in different forms, planned and proposed forms, in subsequent years, 1999 and then in the 2000s. So you have these repeating patterns of invasion, reinvasion, resistance, different generation of resistance. In the coal itself. On the uranium, that's again, read the book and we can talk about that, because uranium is still is beginning to make a comeback. As is coal with the with the Trump coal initiative and other forms of fossil fuel extraction and production, the drill baby drill thing, and it just keeps getting worse and worse under Donald Trump. And if the Republicans stay in power and continue to control the three branches of government. It's going to be a continuation of the resource wars.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. You talk about resource wars, it's not only fossil fuels, but it's water as well.
Yep.
And that's another thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. I think we have time for one more question or comment. Yes.
Thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you.
I feel like it's very emotional to me. My name is Drea Beta, real life instead of publisher. I'm an autistic, ADHD, queer indigenous scholar who studies critical race theory, whiteness, and intersectionality. I'm finishing my PhD at UNM, and I am struggling to find my hope and to not be overcome by rage. During my advocacy work since 2016, I've had around $187,000 of student value. I have changed policy. I have faced the police twice for arrest because Indigenous people, when we show our faces and we raise our voices, they see us as a threat. The executive director of the American Education Research Association said I was the same threat level as a white male who went to a dollar store and killed and shot people the week before at my UNM hearing. When we stand up as Indigenous people, the violence that your generation experienced and survived continues to affect us now, and we are being driven out of these spaces. My aunties in academia, I give you kudos, but your voices are being silenced because your jobs are being threatened and they surveil, and the opportunities we had are being lost. So what do you do with that pain and that rage? And I'm trying to challenge my work. But then I read about the Secretary of Health and Services wants to put autistic people like me on the list. And we know where that goes with our Indigenous history and how they sterilize us. So I'm asking, how do you put aside the rage? I've been working with prayer, I've been working with my community, but how do you keep hope and stand firm in this work? Because I just want to say, throw it all out. I know we can't hide. I know we have my nieces and nephews that are hoping that we continue the work. But when you see your lifetime of work being reimagined now, the violence that we're experiencing, just what advice do you have for us, sir? And wonderful panel. Thank you.
Were you speaking to that, John?
When I was growing up at Farmington, a lot of pain, a lot of hatred. I was a juvenile delinquent, except I never got caught. But all of my crimes were against property. And I was on a path of self-destruction. And I knew about the Red Power movement, and it just seemed, that's like when I was in Schurz, Nevada, and in Berkeley, it was a long ways away. It just seemed too remote, and that'd be, I would self-destruct in Farmington, and I'd be like, some of the friends I grew up with, and just be a street person, an alcoholic on the streets, and just, it didn't look good. But when the National Indian Youth Council moved to Albuquerque, and when I got the opportunity to attend Clyde Warrior Institute in American Indian Studies that summer, I graduated. Then that changed my life. Red Power movement changed my life. And I'm forever grateful. For that. And so, I managed to temper the rage, and there are other ways, there are better ways than the path of self-destruction. It's really no option, and there's really no option but to to walk walk the path, the road, red power. It's inspired by these words. And as opposed to if I self-destructed in the streets of Farmington, like so many of my friends did, victims of hate crimes, throats slit and drinking themselves to death and like that. So it's a pretty heavy trip for a kid that's 17 years old, 17, 18 years old. That fueled my commitment, fueled my dedication. And I know that talk about these young warriors here, they went through much of the same thing growing up, that hurt, that pain, that frustration, that hopelessness there. And is one of the challenges that they'll face. I know Jennifer's gone through a lot of stuff. Melanie, their lives were threatened, and that just made them stronger. You look at Chiliana, he took 2 bullets, and he was on the verge of death. But that didn't stop him. It's like the spirits, summoned up and gave him the strength and the will to live. His vital signs were dropping. He was on the verge of taking the journey. The spirits, the prayers of the people, prevailed, and he continues to be a great leader. And he will be, hopefully, he'll be at the reading here. He said this is he said he's damn proud of this cover here, and this is Chili Yazzie of 1974, the drum, slamming the drum. He lost his arm in that when he was shot twice by that white hate criminal, but he came back strong, and he's still fighting, and hopefully he'll join us in Gallup on July 5th. But he said he's damn proud, because this shows the spirit of the people, 4,000 strong. And my nephew David Mason is joining him. You have Larry Anderson over here, and there's so many great legends of freedom fighters that took to the streets, the mean streets of Farmington. But you look at the faces, you look at the empowerment, you look at the spirit, the soul of the movement. That's right here. They felt strong. They felt empowered. And when I read the Red Nation 2015 that had this march, Indigenous Peoples Day, the first one, 2015, 1,000 Native people out in the streets of Albuquerque, and that hadn't been seen in decades. Then, I knew that Melanie was part of the organizing, that Nick Estes was part of the organizing, Jennifer Denetdale, Jennifer Marley, and just other great warriors of this generation. I commended them. I wrote them an email, and I said, right on. And I've been a supporter of Red Nation and later Red Media and all of the good work that they're doing. They're long distance runners. They've been around since 2012, 2013, and they have the young ones coming up, and they are strong, and they're not gonna they're gonna carry forward the work because really there's no option. You got to do it. You need that kind of spirit, that kind of commitment, that kind of dedication, that kind of love for the people, the continuance of the people. Whether you're a land defender, a water protector, human rights, advocate, Jennifer, and that's that's a challenge for it's primarily a challenge for these young people, and but they've got all my strength and all my energy and all my help them, through this. And I have utmost faith and confidence that they will prevail and they will come out stronger. And, and they will pass it on to, intergenerationally, because that's the way it's always been. The intergenerational struggle, goes way back again, and it will continue. It will continue until we have victory and beyond. We will have victory.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Let's give John another round of applause. Again, if you would like to purchase the book, you can do so at the register. John, if you want to come talk to John, please do. We need to get on the road by 2 o'clock. All right, so let's do about 20 minutes, just because we have some health concerns and things we need to stay on schedule for. And if you would like your book signed, you can come up to John and ask him. Thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. Oh, sorry, one more thing, announcement. Our next event, apologies, is tomorrow, the 4th of July in Farmington, New Mexico. It's at noon, 12 p.m. Mountain Time, and it will be at the Inspired Moments Event Center. Very important. That's going to be an important event because Farmington is, where John is from and where a lot of this originates from. That's his origin story. And so that's going to be a truly historic and momentous event. Thank you so much. It's right off Main Street, so it's right in downtown Farmington. You can't miss it. Noon tomorrow at the Inspired Moments Event Center. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be at the Gallup Flea Market on Saturday.
Thank you for tuning in to today's live stream. Once again, join us in Farmington tomorrow. You can tune in for our last live stream of the book launch series. And we will be selling the book and other titles curated by Red Media at the Gallup Flea Market. You can find all of these, all the information for the events at www.redmedia.press/events. Join us, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting the live stream, and we hope you enjoy the book.